Once upon a time, in a small, peaceful village, there lived a young girl named Grace. Grace was known throughout the village for her warmth, kindness, and many remarkable talents. She was the shining star of the village, a bright beacon of hope and joy for everyone she met. At school, she excelled in every subject, always at the top of her class. As the leader of the youth group, she encouraged her friends and fellow villagers to work together, inspiring them with her dedication and hard work. She also led the village girls' dance group, where her graceful moves left everyone in awe. Everybody in the village were proud of her. The king, who had watched her grow and admired her talents, decided to grant her a scholarship that would cover her entire secondary education and university education as well. The villagers cheered for Grace, delighted to see one of their own achieve so much, and they loved her even more because she remained humble despite her many accolades. No matter how much she achieved, Grace always remained kind and generous to others. But there was one person who didn't share in the village's admiration for Grace: her stepsister, Susan. Susan is a beautiful, brilliant, and talented young girl. She was an excellent dancer and, like Grace, was quite intelligent at school. But no matter how hard she tried, she always seemed to be second to Grace. Whenever Susan danced, Grace's moves shone brighter. Whenever Susan answered a question in class, Grace's answers seemed to outshine hers. Susan could not understand why she could never be the star of the village. Her jealousy grew every day, and she began to resent her stepsister, thinking that Grace was somehow standing in the way of her own success. One day, as Susan sat alone in the backyard, her mind twisted with dark thoughts of envy, a shadow appeared before her. It was an old woman, dressed in dark robes, with sharp, piercing eyes that gleamed in the fading light. The woman was an evil witch, and she had been watching Susan from afar. She knew of Susan's jealousy and saw an opportunity to exploit it. "I can help you, my dear child," the witch said in a voice that seemed to echo with power. "If you want to be the star of the village, I can make it happen. Your stepsister would fade into the shadows, and you will take her place," the witch said. Susan's eyes gleamed with excitement as she heard what the witch said. "But there is a condition," the witch's voice echoed. Susan listened intently, her heart racing, and the witch continued. "You must never let Grace look into her mother's golden mirror. If she does, the spell will be broken, and she will become visible again." Susan's eyes gleamed with greed, and she agreed without hesitation. "Yes, let's do it. I will make sure that mirror is buried forever." With a wave of her crooked hand, the witch cast a dark spell, and Susan watched in awe as a dark cloud covered the bright sky above. She laughed slyly as she made her way into the house to take care of Grace's golden mirror. The next morning, Grace arrived at the village meeting hall for the youth's annual executive election. She was eager to see her friends and talk about the upcoming events and hopefully get elected again to continue being the youth leader. But when she entered, she was a bit surprised at first. No one seemed to notice her. They walked past her talking as though she wasn't there. She shouted, but her voice was ignored. She tried to touch people, but her hands passed right through them as if they were ghosts. Confused and frightened, Grace ran to the village square, hoping to find someone who could see her, or perhaps prove her wrong that she wasn't invisible. But it was the same everywhere. She was invisible, and no one seemed to care. And that was when she saw her stepsister Susan standing in front of a crowd, telling lies about her. Susan told the crowd that Grace had eloped with a wealthy merchant the night before. The villagers who had once loved Grace were shocked and saddened. They started whispering amongst themselves, their trust in Grace fading away. Grace's heart broke as she realized what was happening. She ran back home, tears streaming down her face, desperate to see her reflection in the golden mirror her mother had given her. But when she reached her room, the mirror was gone. Panicked, she ran to the village river, hoping to catch a glimpse of her reflection in the water. But all she saw was a thin, shadow-like version of herself, as though she was nothing more than a wisp of air. For weeks, Susan basked in her newfound glory. She became the new youth leader and grew arrogant and selfish. The villagers, however, began to see her true nature. She was not the warm, kind-hearted person that Grace had been. Susan's cruelty began to show, and the people of the village started to grow wary of her. One day, Grace wandered into the forest, lost and alone. She yearned for someone to talk to, someone who could see her, who could understand her pain. It was there, in the quiet solitude of the woods, that she met an old man. His face was lined with age, and his eyes sparkled with wisdom. The old man could see Grace, even though she was invisible. He smiled warmly and greeted her as if nothing was amiss. "Who are you?" Grace asked, astonished that someone could see her. "I am just an old man who has seen many things," the old man replied with a knowing smile. "And I can see you, my child." Over the following days, Grace visited the old man in the forest. He was the only one who could see her, and he listened to her every word with kindness and patience. And one day, he told her, "There is a way to break the spell. I am telling you because you are a very kind-hearted young woman. But you must find your mother's golden mirror. It is the only way to reverse what has been done." Grace's heart lifted at the thought of the mirror, but she was still invisible and couldn't touch anything. How could she possibly find it? She thought to herself. Then, one night, as Grace wandered back home, she saw Susan covering a heap of grass in their backyard. Her curiosity piqued. Grace followed up on her stepsister's actions and led the old man to the spot the next day. Together, they uncovered the heap of grass, and there, shining in the dirt, was the golden mirror. Grace's hands trembled with excitement as she gazed into the mirror, and as soon as she did, the spell was broken. Grace became visible again, her beautiful form returning to its full glory. She could feel herself again, real, solid, and whole. With tears of gratitude in her eyes, Grace thanked the old man as he disappeared into thin air, leaving her shocked to her bones. Grace, overjoyed, went into her room, feeling the furniture with her hands. She could touch things, and it felt so real. But then, she made up her mind to expose what her stepsister had done to her. She rushed to the village hall, where the other girls were practicing for the village bounty festival. When they saw her, they gasped in shock and joy. Susan, standing in the corner, couldn't believe her eyes. Grace stepped forward and told everyone the truth of what had happened. She explained how Susan, out of jealousy, had used dark magic to make her invisible and ruin her reputation. The villagers were stunned, and the words of Susan's betrayal spread like wildfire throughout the village. The king, upon hearing of Susan's actions, was furious. He ordered her to be banished from the village for using dark magic to harm her own family. Susan was cast out, and she was never to be seen again in the town of Eze. Grace was reinstated to her former position as the youth leader, and she continued to lead with grace, kindness, and wisdom. The villagers embraced her once more, and she became even more beloved than before. Grace remained grateful to the old man in the forest, whose wisdom and kindness had helped her regain what she had lost. And so, she lived a life full of joy and success, with her heart always open to those in need. And every time she looked into her mother's golden mirror, Grace was reminded that no matter what happens, no one can prevent the sun from shining. This is the end of my story.